Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling like your emotions betrayed you, like something was off, but you couldn't quite explain why? Maybe you started questioning yourself, your memory, even your sanity. That's often the silent signature of emotional manipulation. And what you're about to discover will change how you see every relationship, every interaction, and every moment when someone tries to bend your reality. Part 1. The Invisible Weapon. Emotional manipulation doesn't always show up with red flags. It's quiet, subtle. It creeps in through guilt, confusion, charm, and control, until one day you realize you're no longer sure where your thoughts end and someone else's begin. This isn't just about identifying manipulators. It's about understanding what happens inside you when someone tries to control your reality. Because the most dangerous part isn't always the person pulling the strings. It's the traps your own mind sets for you along the way. Emotional manipulation is a form of psychological influence where someone uses your emotions against you to gain control, power, or advantage, often without your full awareness. Unlike obvious forms of abuse, manipulation hides behind a mask of concern, affection, or logic. It doesn't scream, it whispers. At its core, emotional manipulation plays on your empathy, your fears, your need to be understood, and your desire to be liked or accepted. The manipulator doesn't need to force you. They get you to second-guess yourself until you're the one doing the work for them. Some of the most common tactics include gaslighting, making you doubt your memory, perception, or judgment. That never happened, or you're too sensitive. There's guilt tripping, using your sense of responsibility or kindness to get you to comply. Love bombing, overwhelming you with affection, praise, or gifts to lower your defenses, only to withdraw them once control is gained. The silent treatment punishes you with emotional withdrawal, making you anxious and desperate to reconnect. Projection accuses you of feelings or actions they're actually guilty of, creating confusion and defensiveness. What makes emotional manipulation so disorienting is that it often comes wrapped in care. The manipulator may seem concerned for your well-being or frame their actions as just trying to help. That's why victims often don't recognize it until the damage is deep. Part 2. Why your mind becomes the battlefield. To truly understand how emotional manipulation works, we have to look inward. Manipulators don't create our vulnerabilities, they exploit the ones already there. At the heart of it, we're wired for connection. From childhood, our survival depended on being accepted by our caregivers, our tribe, our community. That wiring doesn't just disappear in adulthood. We still seek approval, safety, love, and a sense of belonging. When these needs are unmet or when we fear losing them, we become more pliable, more likely to bend ourselves to keep those bonds intact. Another key factor is conflict avoidance. Many of us have been conditioned to believe that keeping the peace is more important than speaking the truth. We'd rather tolerate discomfort than risk confrontation. Manipulators sense this and use it to slowly shift boundaries without resistance. Then there's self-doubt. Most people carry some form of insecurity about their worth, their judgment, or their ability to handle difficult emotions. When someone subtly reinforces those doubts, it's easy to start trusting their version of reality over your own. And finally, there's hope. This might seem like a strength, but in the context of manipulation, hope can keep us stuck, hoping the other person will change, hoping things will go back to how they were, hoping that maybe it's just a phase. The truth is, we're not weak for being vulnerable. We're human. But the more we understand these emotional and psychological terrains, the more equipped we are to defend them. Because manipulation doesn't just happen when someone takes control. It happens when we unknowingly hand it over. Part 3. The identity theft. One of the most disorienting effects of emotional manipulation is how it quietly distorts your sense of self. You don't just feel confused, you start losing touch with who you are. At first, the changes are subtle. You might hold back an opinion to avoid conflict. You downplay your feelings to keep the peace. You second-guess your gut and lean more on their version of events. Little by little, the lines that define you, your values, your boundaries, your voice, begin to blur. This is the identity shift, and it's one of the most dangerous outcomes of emotional manipulation. It's not forced, it's shaped. You adapt to survive the emotional terrain. You become who you think you need to be to stay safe, loved, or accepted. This can create what psychologists sometimes call a borrowed identity, a version of you molded by another person's preferences, expectations, or control. And the longer you stay in this dynamic, the more that borrowed self starts to feel normal, even though deep down you know something's missing. You may find yourself asking, why don't I recognize myself anymore? Why can't I trust my own thoughts? That's not weakness. That's the effect of long-term manipulation. It destabilizes your inner compass. The good news, your true self isn't gone. It's buried under layers of fear, adaptation, and confusion. But it's still there. Reclaiming it starts with recognizing that the person you've become under manipulation isn't the person you have to stay. The journey back to yourself begins when you stop asking how to fix the relationship and start asking how to find your voice again. Part 4. The mental traps that keep you stuck. When manipulation takes root, your mind becomes a battlefield. Logic clashes with emotion. Intuition gets drowned out by self-doubt. You know something feels wrong, but you can't seem to act on it. This is the essence of cognitive dissonance, when two conflicting truths live side by side in your brain, creating a mental and emotional tug-of-war. You might think, this person is hurting me, but also they care about me. Or I should leave, followed immediately by, but what if I'm just overreacting? Over time, this internal chaos leads to self-gaslighting, where you begin to dismiss your own thoughts and feelings before anyone else has to. You silence your inner voice out of fear that it's wrong, dramatic, or untrustworthy. You become your own critic, your own censor. And this is exactly what manipulation is designed to do. Create enough confusion that you begin to police your own reality. The manipulator doesn't need to twist the facts anymore. You do it for them. Here are the most common mental traps to be aware of. Cognitive dissonance, the internal clash between knowing you're being mistreated but still believing the person cares. To reduce the discomfort, your mind tries to justify or downplay what's happening. Over-justification, you find yourself explaining away the other person's behavior over and over. They had a rough childhood, they're under stress, or they didn't mean to hurt me. While empathy is important, over-justification keeps you stuck in rationalizations that override your emotional truth. The self-doubt spiral. This is the loop where you start questioning your memory, feelings, and instincts. When you're told often enough that you're too sensitive, forgetful, or dramatic, you begin to internalize those labels. Hope as bait, you hold on to the good moments, believing they represent the real version of the person. You think, if I just do this differently, things will go back to how they were. But hope becomes a trap when it's based on potential, not patterns. This inner war is exhausting. It drains your confidence, clouds your judgment, and leaves you feeling powerless, not just in the relationship, but in your own mind. Part 5. Breaking free and rebuilding your shield. Every journey out of emotional manipulation begins with a single moment of clarity, a shift where confusion gives way to recognition. You start to notice patterns, not just incidents. It's no longer about a bad day or one harsh comment. It's about repeated cycles of control, guilt, and distortion. Often this turning point is subtle. It could be a conversation that leaves you emotionally drained for the 100th time, a realization that your boundaries keep getting ignored, or a quiet moment when you hear your own voice in your head whisper, "This isn't right." Recognition is like turning on a light in a room you didn't know was dark. It doesn't fix everything immediately, but it changes the game. You begin to observe instead of absorb. You start to name what's happening, and when you name it, you take the first step toward reclaiming your power. Once you recognize emotional manipulation for what it is, the next step is learning how to protect yourself, not just from others, but from the mental habits that made you vulnerable in the first place. Ground yourself in your values. When you're clear on what matters to you, you're less likely to be pulled into someone else's narrative. Rebuild emotional boundaries. They're not about keeping people out. They're about keeping you intact. Question emotional logic. Manipulators often make you feel like their emotions are facts. Learn to pause and ask, is this true, or does it just feel true? Practice pattern recognition. Don't just listen to words. Watch for repetition. Create reality anchors, journal your experiences, talk to trusted friends, or speak with a therapist. When you start to question yourself, these anchors keep you grounded in truth. Trust your body. Before your mind knows, your body often does. Pay attention to physical cues, tightness in your chest, stomach knots, fatigue after a conversation. These are signals, not coincidences. Most importantly, reclaim your voice. You may have learned to silence yourself to keep the peace. Start small. Speak up, even if your voice shakes. Saying no, expressing your feelings, or simply disagreeing is how you begin to take up space again. Emotional manipulation isn't always loud or obvious. It often works by making you doubt yourself, disconnect from your identity, and surrender your truth one small piece at a time. But the moment you begin to see the pattern, you start to reclaim your power. Remember, your mind is not your enemy. It's your ally once you learn to trust it again. You're not broken, you're rebuilding. With awareness, boundaries, and self-trust, you can shield yourself not just from manipulation, but from the lies that kept you small. You've always had the strength. Now you have the tools to use it. If you're ready to dive deeper into the psychology of manipulation and learn how to protect your mental sovereignty, subscribe for more insights that reveal the hidden patterns most people never see. Because understanding manipulation isn't just about defense. It's about reclaiming the power that was always yours. Remember, the strongest shield isn't built from fear. It's built from clarity. And clarity begins with seeing yourself as you truly are, not as someone else wants you to be.